I could, better prepare myself on, addressing the kind of questions you guys might have. I would really prefer it to be an interactive session, although I do have a presentation, and my thoughts are mostly very, at times even abrasive, but very modern for the most part, I would like to think. Feel free to engage me anytime you guys feel like, even during the presentation. So before I begin, your story begins here. I think I can definitely give you a lot of pep talk about, what you need to do, what you do not need to do, what I did, what, somebody else did. All that is, I think passé. It's really important for you to understand that the story of your life begins with you right here, right now. Okay? The most important person in your life right now is you, nobody else. It's not your parents, it's not your girlfriend, not your boyfriend, not your friends, not your best buddy. It's you, only you, right? That's the biggest learning that I got after having traveled the world, going to the best business school, going to one of the premier colleges in India. In fact, I was the president in BITS Pilani, and we had set up Oasis. And I do remember, people used to come there, and we used to really yearn to be in Delhi. We're like, Delhi University, yaar, kya ladkiyan hai wahan par, It was funny. But today I can confidently say that it was one part of my life. At that time I was always looking outward, what was it outside, what was I not getting versus what was I really getting. And today, the only difference is that I'm very content with who I am, what I'm doing, okay. I'm high on life. So I don't need like drinks to, get high, I don't need smokes, I don't need to get Coke and Pepsi and whatnot. It's really just about me. And my story has begun with me, and that's what I'll tell you guys about. So before I begin on my journey and Harva and how I set it up and how I came about it, let me tell you that the objective was not to set up the third most innovative company in India. If that had been, that I probably would have set up the first most innovative company. I don't think that was the objective. The objective was not to become a CNN Youth Icon. I don't think the objective was really to become, XYZ or get this award or that. The objective that I set out with after quitting Citi was to really chase my own dream and do what I was really happy doing, okay? Because all of us have read about it, all of us have heard about it, we come from a culture which is very rich. We talk about it in our own homes and closed walls, but we don't really address it outside. So we say, karmanya vadika raste maafadishu kadachana. That's all great, but haan theek hai, wo to books mein hai, bahut acha hai. But that's exactly what is applicable here, right? Because the moment you start to focus on what you're doing right now, you'll suddenly realize that, everything that you're doing is making sense and not really focus on the result. So, as Amir Khan in this movie says, Kamyabi chuno, whatever, right? Do the deed. Sorry? Excellence, right? Choose the excellence. So, eventually it comes to that point where you're just focusing on what you're doing. And that's what brings me to a point where, today a lot of people ask me, how is it that you started out? What did you start doing? What kind of books did you read? It's really not about that. It's really not about, what next new book of entrepreneurship that I picked up and I suddenly got this idea and I started to flip through it and I got to Harva. It wasn't that. It's really about focusing on your senses. What is it that's pleasing you? What is it that's making you happy? What is it that's making you cry? What is it that's making you angry, sad, whatever? And only you, not your parents, not your brother, not your friend, not your girlfriend, boyfriend, anything, right? It's only you. The moment you start to focus on your senses is when you realize that you have begun to unravel your own journey of what your eventual goal is or what are you trying to do, right? And that is when you'll come to a point of really identifying what's the first step that you need to take. And that first step could be music, it could be arts, it could be filmmaking, it could be, archaeology for all I care. But it really begins there. And that is how I began. So, a lot of people that you hear about today, and this is something I say very often, मेरी आँखें US में खुली थी, because I grew up in Dehradun, then I came to BITS Pilani, and then from there I went to the US. So from a small town to a village, and then off the, the big country, land of skyscrapers in New York and Philadelphia, and the first thing you get to do there is, make a social security number. Like that's a real pain because you don't have a driving license because you don't have a social security number, but you don't have that because you don't have a driving license, and all you have is a passport. So you get to this catch-22 until you figure out somewhere in the university, and this is a known problem. But it starts off, and then you finally get a social security number, and you go apply for a driving license, where it starts off right at the driving test. So they give you a test, if there's a red light, what do you do? If there's a stop sign, what do you do? And you actually say that, at a stop sign, you stop and you look to the left, look to the right, and then you move on. And that sounds great. You say, yaar, US mein to maine driving test diya tha and I failed the first time. And you're very proud of it. But unfortunately, we don't do that in India, right? And then we start off and we think, there's something wrong. India mein to yaar traffic problems bahut hain. Traffic hi aisa hai, log hi aise hain. But we're a part of it, So the most recent event that happened with me was I was going in this car and the driver actually, we're going on one way and he suddenly turned right. Without the traffic sign, he just turned right on the road. And I said, yaar, ye kya kiya? Ye samne se gaadi aa rahi hai, it's not legal, right? I mean, why are you doing this? So, he said, sir, ye to apna style hai. And, that's when you start to question, well, this guy was not really taught. He was basically given a car and he says, ye clutch hai, ye accelerator hai, ye brake hai, start driving, this is the steering wheel, you turn around. That's the fundamental problem that we're facing in the society today. So in my mind, I am the country. I am the person, I am the problem. Unless I start with me, it will not solve anything, right? This morning I logged on to Facebook and I think one of your alums, Swati Sahani, she's in Harvard. I hope she gets to hear this because I commented on her post. She had basically complained about these latest vaginal gels launched, right? So fairness creams for face, fairness creams for armpits, now fairness creams for vagina. Great. We complain about it, that's great, guys, that's terrific. But let's not blame the country, right? The country has accepted, if Baba Ramdev and company had launched these gels, I'd be really complaining. If country, India had not accepted Sunny Leone as, a full-blown actress in Bollywood, I'd still be complaining. But here the problem is that a woman has manufactured it, a woman is marketing it, and the women are possibly buying it as well. Okay? So problem is right here. We can't be complaining about it, citing India as the example. Okay? The problem is that most of us start to complain outside, whereas the problem is right within. Okay? The moment I address it with myself, I can start to do something about it. So with that, I'd take you guys through something that I did. Can we go to the next slide? Do you have a journey for me began in 2002 in Wharton, business strategy class. I was going through this book, Swan Zoo, and they tell us, in heat of the battle, don't get emotional. And I thought, that's a great idea. I've been told that, I've been taught that, but I've never really figured out how to disconnect from my emotions. And so I asked the professor. He's one of the best business strategy professors. And I asked him, so how do you disconnect yourself? And he said, well, you just do it. I said, but how do you do it? Because, I'm very emotional. I've spent about, $150,000 in this MBA, and I'm very emotional about my BMW that I'm going to buy. How do I disconnect myself? He says, well, you just do it, right? There was no satisfactory answer. And that's when I began to think that, that's what we've read in Bhagavad Gita, that's what has been said by 50 other people. Enough wisdom exists out there. You don't need to read any new book, you don't need to do, go out to any other new meditative session, but you need to basically figure out how to do it. That's what began my journey. Do you have, can you just get this here? Maybe I can change it myself, right? So it's interesting, right? I started my travels there and I went to a place in Virginia. It's an ISKCON temple. I picked up my first copy of Bhagavad Gita, scored through the book, maybe finished it in about 2 weeks, read all the English translations, and the questions were unanswered because, I basically understood the meaning of it. It seemed very good, sounded quite nice, but wasn't really able to justify. So then I traveled and I went to South America for some time, tried to figure out, with the Inca civilization, what were they saying. So all this thanks to Citibank, they have these mandatory offs for like 2 weeks where everything is turned off. So, thank God for that, but gave me a chance to kind of travel out here as well, and I went to Pondicherry. So went to Aurobindo Ashram and tried to understand what they were saying. Still no answers, right? I mean, everybody is trying to preach you something, but not really telling you how to do it. And finally I went to Himalayas. For about 3 months I was there. I took time off and spent time with few people, few of the sages and sadhus and sants over there. And I figured out what they were really doing, right? And what I came to understand, and this is something that is not really revelational for any of you guys. This is something very simple. It's right here. Is that all they do is they're living with their senses completely aware of themselves. Okay? So once you're aware of something, that's exactly what Mahatma Buddha said, or any of the other learned wise people said, that if you're aware of something, then you'd actually completely be in it. So if you're aware of yourself, you'd never be able to commit a crime. You'd never be able to commit a murder. You'd never be able to commit a rape or whatever. So the key was awareness. And the moment I got to it, suddenly doors opened up. And what's interesting is, when you start to talk about the yugas, people talk about, the Kal Yuga, Dwapar, Treta, Satyug, and it all sounds very nice and comforting when you hear about it. You think, these are all some periods of time, abhi to Kal Yuga khatam hone wala hai. You come to a realization that that whole yuga system is actually within you. It's your own realization, your own awareness, that you are in a certain mode of your being, and you suddenly have come out of it. So basically in Satyug, people were very antrik. They were, self-contained. They never really needed to look out. And in today's world, which is Kali Yuga, people are very yantric. So I believe in more in my laptop. I'm unable to do this presentation without this laptop, whereas I should be completely, comfortable just talking to you like this. But having said that, the biggest piece was that, today people, every guy that you turn to, the politicians or the people around, people are talking about poverty and poverty alleviation and women empowerment. And none of it really makes sense, because if it did, and if people were really doing something about it, it should have been addressed. So the journey of Harva began there, where I started to question with the biggest banks, and I was with a consulting firm in the US, I don't want to name this one, but what we did was, in CSR, you basically do a charitable initiative for 2 days in a month or 2 days in a year, and you really figure out. So you think, there's this drought-struck area, there's about 1,000 odd people there in a village, we need to do something. So, 3 rich men get together, one says, I'll donate 1,000 buckets, another says, I'll donate 1,000 buckets worth of water, and third guy says, well, I'll give you 1,000 employees, and on one nice November weekend, we'll go there and donate this water. Well, what happens is, that's exactly what they do, but is it sustainable? It's not. And after that, what they do is, they put up a big banner, because what really matters is, how big was the banner of the company's name, and how long did it stay, because that's CSR. Right? So as a giver, you're always higher than the taker, because you're giving something to them. They're bound to take it, right? They can't refuse, because what matters is your brand name. In charity, however, if you were, if you're, let's say, committed a crime or something wrong, done some sin, then you go to a confession box. You go to a church, you go to a temple, you go to a gurdwara, wherever, and the priest tells you, this is what you've done wrong and this is what you need to do. And let's say you go to a temple, right? And if you were to do something, had done something wrong, the guy says, fine, you get, really good food, home-cooked food, and feed 20 homeless people here. And if you feed those 20 people and the people don't accept the food, they say, what rubbish is this? This is not the kind of food that we eat. Guess what? Your sin has not been cleansed, right? So as a giver, you're lower than the taker. And after that deed, you don't really talk to the press about it. You don't, call Times of India and say, guess what, I've done this great deed, I've fed 20 hungry and homeless people. You don't talk about it. So the CSR and charity are the biggest problems that you're talking about. That the Western civilization talks about CSR, the Eastern civilization believes in true charity, and that's where the clash is. That's what my understanding was, and I began with Harvard. So one of my travels in 2005, after consulting, was that I was traveling in Dubai, and we had this really nice consulting assignment. We were, talking to one of the biggest clients. They were staying in Burj Al Arab, and it's, if you guys know of it, it's a majestic hotel. It's like splurging wealth. It's gold-plated walls and emerald faucets, and Rolls Royces to drop and pick up the customers from and to the airport. And the only thought that popped up in my head, incidentally, Prince Al Walid is one of the largest shareholders of Citigroup. He's like, what does he eat when he's hungry and what does he drink when he's thirsty? Any answers here? Do you guys ever think about it? And what does Bill Gates drink when he's thirsty? What does he eat when he's hungry? Any answers? Any guesses? It's water and wheat, right? No matter what form they have it in, no matter, you might go back home and you might have, whole grain bread from some bakery, but at the end of the day, it's still the same raw materials. And so what it really means is that when I'm earning $1 billion a day or $1 trillion a day. If my basic needs remain the same, then my basic objectives also need to remain the same. My aspirations could improve. And that's where I always tell the people that if your ambition, if you want to get out of college, if your ambition is to become a billionaire or the richest man, that's really not something sustainable. It's not something definite. If you chase something definite, then that is where your whole perspective changes. Because let's say you want to become a billionaire today, doesn't mean anything. 3 years from now, the currency devaluation might be so much that, a billionaire might not mean anything. So it's a moving objective, it's a moving target. So have something definite, that this is what I want to do, right? So fortunately with Citi, I had access to a lot of numbers, and I did manage to crunch some of those in 2008 and 9. So when I relocated back in 2006 to India, the banking landscape looked very different, right? If any of you have read about it, in 2006 or 7, we were predicting that the banking landscape would open up to the foreign banks, and all of us would be able to, basically Citibank would be ruling the country. But it did not happen that way, right? 2008, you had the real estate crisis, and then boom. So you had, around 2008 was also the Ramalinga Raju Satyam scam, and that was about 7,000 crores. And that was a big number at that time. We thought, wow, 7,000 crores, the guy, just blew up. How do you even do that kind of scam? And in 2009, you had 70,000 crores being written off by the government of India. And you're thinking, well, how do you write off 70,000 crores? Well, lo and behold, in 2010, you had the largest MFI IPO in the world in India. You've just blown up 70,000 crores. That means they did not have the ability to pay back. And there's lots of ifs and buts and lots of nuts and bolts to be cracked. But that is where you start to question the fundamentals. So what are we missing? Did your life change in any way in 2008? No, it did not. You were still having the same thing. You were still sleeping 8 hours. You were still traveling by the same buses and the same cars. And you were probably paying 2 rupees higher for the petrol that you were buying. So net is a country of volumes, of numbers, where we don't really feel the pinch, whereas these big things are happening. Okay? And now, of course, you have the 1,76,000 crore scam in 2G, right? And who's questioning? I don't know. I mean, well, there's Baba Ramdev out there, there's, Anna Hazare out there, there's, several other activists who are questioning about it, but, who's doing something about it? And that is where I figured that, I probably could not really do anything of those things because I wanted to make a sustainable difference, right? Where it was value creation oriented, but without any handicap. I didn't really want to talk about it as a politician. Because the moment people start questioning ulterior motives, that's what disturbs you. I don't want any disturbance. I want to do something very, very independently. That's why I took the entrepreneurial route. So, another interesting aspect that when you travel around India, we're 60 to 70% agrarian economy, and yet we are the ones who went through double-digit food inflation in the past 2 years. Okay, that means there's shortage of supply, excess of demand. Then why are we not, as smart people, getting into agriculture? Because it's not sexy. That's not something that people look forward to. Well, what do you want to do? I really want to become an actor, because that is what is aspirational. But I'm okay with paying, 10 times the price of food grains that I was paying before. So that did not make sense to me. More importantly, everyone gets out of like a tier 3, tier 4 college, and the best job they have is a BPO job, right? And so labor arbitrage is one thing that people are talking about, and you get into a BPO job, and today the biggest problem in the BPO industry is attrition, and we're losing business to Philippines and China. Yet, in a country of 1 billion people, our biggest problem in rural India is unemployment. So attrition is in 20% of the population, unemployment is in 80% of the population. As a smart guy, I need to be linking these two things. If there's excess water in some place and droughts in certain other areas, as a logical, reasonable guy, I need to be linking these two things up, because the moment I do that, it makes sense. But what I found illogical is that people today are selling toothpaste tubes, right? You're selling a toothpaste tube for $5 in rural India. You're selling insurance, life insurance for people under 200 rupee premium. What the problem is, it's still not selling, right? And if I ask any smart guy, why is toothpaste tubes not selling, or why is insurance products not selling? Their answer is, well, these guys are just not educated. They don't understand. Unko pata nahi sir, kya hai isme? Bullshit. Rural Indians are probably the smartest guys than all of us put together in this room. These guys understand. एक किसान की कीमत, इस ज़मीन की कीमत उसकी जान से कहीं ज़्यादा होती है. So the guy really understands where to put his money in, right? And toothpaste is something that we have conditioned the people into believing, right? So for me, logically, it was like, why do I use Pepsodent? Why do I use Close-Up? Is it because there's a pretty girl in the ad and that's what I've been conditioned to believe? Because I've certainly not gone into the Close-Up factories, right? I haven't figured out. And I'm not even a, moral preacher here. when I start to look deeper, I think that, in places, in villages that we have our centers, you try and tell these guys to brush their teeth with toothpaste, the guys don't. And you're thinking, well, this seems like a smart guy, he's got lots of money, why isn't he doing that? He's still using datun, neem datun. And I thought, well, if he's using neem datun, that must be good because, all their teeth clearly look healthy, they're happy, they have teeth till like, 80s and 90s and they seem to be quite, content with it. And these guys are consciously not using it. So then you start to question, what if I could sell neem datun over back in the cities and to the Western world? I can get Shah Rukh Khan to brand the same thing and actually sell it back. Now what it does is, if I were to sell it for, let's say, for 5 peps for one datun, then the guy starts to think, well, if I use this whole tree up in 3 years or 4 years, I need to be planting more trees. What you've just done is created a completely natural cycle, right? And it made sense to me. So that's when I began to think about rural India, and fortunately I came across this quote in 2009 by Jim Rogers: investment bankers will till the land and farmers will drive the Ferraris. And lo and behold, I actually found myself driving the tractors. So I bought, made investments in rural India, in Dehradun, in a couple of states, in Haryana as well. And I firmly believe that if I could turn the clock on this one, right, if I could make it more efficient and scientific, then I could definitely make it sustainable for my own self. I mean, I could earn much more money than I am earning in banking, but if I could actually link people up to it, then, the voluminous growth will be tremendous. Because what's lacking today in India is not production, it's purely distribution. If you think that, we don't have electricity because we're not producing enough, it's not. We don't have electricity because we're not distributing it the right way. We don't have water because we're not distributing it the right way. The moment you understand that is when you start to look at the problem completely differently, right? I don't even want to comment on, what happened in the power grid failure. There's been lots of debates, but I think I know exactly what went wrong, right? You're not distributing it right. If you could localize the power generation, then distribution becomes no problem at all. And thus came Harva. So Harva, as it stands for, is harnessing value of rural India. Means green in Hindi. Being a banker, the color green really fascinates me because, green on balance sheet looks really good versus red. So went with this and went to the farmers, basically started to talk to them. After I did something sustainable on my own farm, we did likes of adrak and lemongrass in Dehradun, vicinity of Dehradun, and it worked out quite well because I realized that wherever there is low produce agricultural areas, it makes sense to do farming for crops that would make sense without the natural resources present. So I'll come back to it, but essentially we then went to Mewat. If you guys know, Mewat is about 70 kilometers from here. It's the armpits of India, literally. It's like worse than Louisiana. When you look at it, farmers don't earn more than 500-600 rupees a month. And it's not funny, right? These guys that you're seeing around. So convincing these guys either way is next to impossible because you're trying to convince them, and this is exactly what I'm doing. This is my farm behind, you see another guy's farm, and you're trying to convince them that, if you do this, it'll be beneficial for both of us because, then you can provide water at the same time and we can reap the, crop at the same time, but they won't understand. They're like, just not budging, right? And whatever you call it, right? So if the government comes, they'll say, it's casteism and, there's riots and religious differences and whatnot, but it's not. Trust me, it's purely on the ground, Maslow's hierarchy. Once you realize it's all about roti kapra aur makan. The guys don't have a positive cash flow, they're not able to sustain, so they'll actually not go for it. So having said this, we started to look at ways of convincing the people on what they could actually do differently, and we started to look at the women, right? These are the gungat clad women and the burqa clad women, the homemakers, the caretakers, the household workers. And then boom, came the eureka moment for me. Excuse me, can you play the video please? So, there's this bunch of women. We went to several villages. We went to Bhiwadi, right? All of you guys would have seen it, heard of it. It's an industrial town, got lots of farms. One second. Alright, hold. So, I'm sure you guys heard it, but what we did was we went to these villages, right? And the training team trained about 300 odd women and men in Bhiwadi, and we had zero conversion of people who wanted to work. The guys in Bhiwadi have lots of land. All they wanted to do was just get drunk and become, a chowkidar or a driver, because they have lots of land. They don't really care. The women, all they wanted to do is get a certificate and show it to the mother-in-law. So then we went to these villages interiors, and we realized that these women are actually very keen to work with us. And once we got to them, this woman is an 8th pass woman, and she actually was very passionate about working with us. So she came to the trainer and she said, she wanted to work, and the trainer was trying to convince her that, this is not going to make sense. She's not educated, she's never seen a computer, never even heard of a computer. And we were surprised because, the first question she asked the trainer was not what it does, what it is, how it works, all that. She said, ma'am, हमने तो ABCD पढ़ा है स्कूल में, यहाँ तो QWERTY भी लिखा है, और ये कैसे है? And we were surprised because, that's some observation. We didn't have an answer at that time. I do have an answer today, but this is what she did after 4 hours of seeing the computer for the first time. What's surprising is that none of you in this room can do it. I mean, if you can, that's great, but I certainly can't. I've heard this video several times because I've not put my head and mind to it. It seems like a pretty trivial thing to all of us, but when you start to think about it, that is exactly what grassroots innovation is, right? In order to get a tire repaired, I mean, let's say you get a flat tire, let's say you're driving a Mercedes, let's say you're driving a Maybach or a Ferrari, right? You get a flat tire, where do you go? You go to Michelin showroom? No, you don't. You go to the next tire puncture wala, right? And how much does he charge you? 50 bucks for a Ferrari tire, 50 bucks for a Maruti 800 tire. How is it different? Because that's a process, right? There is no intellectual capital involved there. He knows exactly what to do. There's a nail. He's not going to be a scientific engineer about what aerodynamic nature does this car have, or the rubber technology that's being used. It's very, very simple. So that was the innovation that we came across. And then we went out and trained about 500 odd women across these villages in Haryana. They were all ghungat clad women, and from Jat villages with Kha panchayats and problems that you could imagine were definitely there. Now lots of people would actually question me on, were there no problems? Did you not come across societal problems? Did you not come across people with resistance and this and that? I'm like, guys, all that is fine. But if you're talking sense and logic, everybody listens to you. So when we went there, these are all ghungat clad women in Jat villages. You go to the men, you say, we will give them free training. Do you have a problem with that? They say no. We will actually get them in their ghungats from their houses to the village center, which is also in the village. Do you have a problem with that? They said no. And we'll pay them a salary. Would you have a problem with that? They said no. So there is actually no problem. Whereas there's a different way to it. Now I take a completely flip side, like a social activist. I say, ghungat pratha is bad, and wearing a burqa is bad, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. You've completely offended the guy. The moment you start offending the people is when they've gone wrong, right? So the point is that you need to really go and work in the relationships. The country begins with me, the society begins with me. Unless I start to relate to the society, I can't come here and say, guys, I've just been dropped into, Gurgaon, and I don't really relate to the people. Neither do I speak Hindi, nor do I speak, eat roti. And I don't understand where you come from. And then I'm trying to do something for the society. It's not possible. Unless you relate to them, completely go, hand in glove with them and understand what is it that they're trying to do, people will not be with you. And that is, I believe, something that we were able to track. So what?
A tractor making its way through farmland.
Guys, hold. So what it resulted in was the first all-women rural BPO. We're in the Guinness Book and Limca Book of Records now. And I'm actually vehemently and consciously not even talking about women empowerment. And there's a reason for it. When I go, or the company goes in these rural areas, we're going to Bhutan and Pakistan now, we don't talk about them getting the jobs because they're women. We give them jobs because they're competent. And we go to a company and get them the jobs because we do a good economical job with good quality, not because we're doing it for rural women. The moment you put these things logically in place, everything starts to work. Now, let's flip it. I say, I'm doing this good for you because you're women. They're already offended. And I go to the company, please give me a job because, I'm doing women empowerment in the villages. You've already lost the case, right? That's the big thing, shift in thinking. That's the big focus change, what you're trying to do. And that's why what I call it is a socio-capitalistic model. So holistically what we are doing is something which I just talked about the lack of distribution in India. The distribution lacks in India because there's not enough value being created at the nodes. If there are enough roads, there'd be enough distribution, but there are no roads, right? So I can either wait for the government to make roads in Gurgaon and all the other villages around it, or I can lay down a distribution which is a virtual distribution, which is through internet. So what we do is we get this proverbial hut, right, which is basically out in the boonies but in a village, and we basically connect it with electricity and internet. Once you've got those two things, we actually get about 200 to 300 women to work in rural BPOs. We've got the client backend with US, UK, all these places, and you're doing a credible job. This makes it a profitable, sustainable unit. We make revenues which are cash flow positive. It sustains us, it sustains the management. Now the second thing that we start to do is, again, people are talking about right to education. Interesting fact I got to know today is what 1800 students here of BCom and 150 odd for economics. I mean the population of India is like way more than that, right? And you have about 60, 70 professional colleges around Delhi which are going out of business because they can't get students. And there are about 2 million odd students around Delhi who don't have admissions. What's surprising to me is, guys, why aren't you matching these things up? Because nobody really wants to connect them, right? The colleges that are going out of business want to charge a fees of about 5-6 lakhs and above. The students who are here who don't have education don't really have the ability to pay that. Or even if they did have the ability, they don't have the means to kind of get or realize that kind of cash. So what we do is in student help desks, we give them free career counseling, right? Now it's free, how does it benefit me? Once I'm able to get the students, now think of it flip side. My only challenge in expanding this distribution is middle level management. All of you guys are really excited, you're passionate, you're like, great man, cool stuff, I want to be associated with you. Hame internship karni hai. Great, come over. Come to the village in, let's say, Rajasthan. You like, go there 2 days, then like, sir, yahan se kuch, Gurgaon mein kuch mil sakta hai, so then we can commute every day. That's the biggest problem that you have. So I say, okay, great, I need to cultivate the middle level management right in the villages where we're setting up the distribution. And how do I get that? By the students who I'm counseling right from the centers. So we're able to place the students. The universities and the colleges that are getting the students actually end up giving some incentives, so that makes it profitable. We've got about 200,000 students across 7 states registered as of today in just about a year and a half. And we're looking to go over 1 million in the next few years. The next thing that we end up doing is connecting the farmers to the farming help desks, where we give them 4 different kinds of services on irrigation, on crop diversification, on increasing throughput, and getting better prices. Because we believe the information is key, so once you're able to get the information, then it's great. You talk to any of the farmers and you're asking them, you've got a mobile phone, you got this, you got XYZ other benefits, why aren't you just accessing these facilities? They say because nobody listens to them. So what we've done is, we've got the buy-in from the village, the women from the households are working with us, students are coming to us, they've already started to believe in us, and now the farmers start to come to us as well. Now this is the basic platform that we base the Harva Employee Loan Program or the microfinance program on. The biggest problem with microfinance in India today is that we have no accountability because we don't have any social security infrastructure. Because we don't have that, we don't really understand how to account for these loans with the people. So what we end up doing is link it to the women who are on the ground, who are our employees. They actually refer only women in 5-kilometer radius around their villages, and they know the best information. So SBI in Badshahpur has 40% delinquencies, and the land rates over there are above 10 crores an acre, right? And you'd be surprised, why is that the case? Because the farmers are really smart. They've figured out, next assembly elections are around the corner, it'll anyway be written off. Why do we care? Now if you've got a woman right there in the households, then she knows exactly how many cows this guy has, how many sons, daughters, what is the kind of cash flow, and what's the latest mobile number. That is the crack that we were able to basically tap into. So that said, I'd say you've looked at all these conventional sayings, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. I think that's all great. We just need to kind of step out and start thinking a little more creatively. That's exactly what the government is doing today as well. They're saying, let's do skill development. I'll teach you how to fish, and then off you go to Thar Desert. Well, there's no water, there's no fish. What does the guy do? So you need to basically get to a different level and do it the social capitalistic way, where you teach them how to fish, and you send them off to Thar Desert, but then you go and dig a pond, fill it with rain-harvested water, and then you basically get them to, create value within their own villages. So that's where I would say my story began. That's where your story should begin. I have a couple of videos. Now can we play the first video, the main video? So this is where we began. This is what you've got to look at the whole jugaad, right? And
A
there's
tractor making its way through farmland, women working the fields, and an unremarkable building that sits in the middle of a village. It's an unlikely location for a call center. But Harwa, based in Haryana's Tikli, is not your usual BPO. The loudest sound here is from the generator that runs the computers. And the employees are local women, who, until recently, were all homemakers. Suman Devi still has to complete her household chores before she comes here to work. But this mother of two has no complaints.
चेंज बहुत सारा हुआ है. पहले जैसे मेरे हस्बैंड कमाते थे, उनमें कुछ इतना वो नहीं हो पाता था गुजारा, लेकिन यहाँ से अब कुछ सैलरी मिल रही है मुझे, तो उसमें हम अच्छे से वो करते हैं.
Before Harwa can put people to work, it has to train them. And so, it offers to teach the women of Tikli crucial computer skills.
कंप्यूटर सिखाया गया. पहले तो बेसिक ट्रेनिंग दी कंप्यूटर की, फिर ट्रेनिंग के बाद यहाँ पे मतलब काम की ट्रेनिंग दी गई है. उसके बाद हम यहाँ पे काम करते हैं. सोचा नहीं था कभी कि गांव में ऐसा होगा, लेकिन हुआ. अच्छा लगा. जैसे कहीं बाहर जाने की भी कोई जरूरत नहीं. अपने किसी मतलब लेट भी हो जाए तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है. लेट आए तो थोड़ा सा लेट चले जाए, मतलब अच्छा लगता है. हम तो कह रहे हैं जो नहीं कर रहा वो भी आए यहाँ पे करे आके.
Harwa is the brainchild of Ajay Chaturvedi. A US-educated corporate executive, he believes women make ideal employees at a rural BPO.
Initially we started out with men. We realized that these guys wouldn't really stick around. You give them a training for 4 months, 5 months, and then they leave, they go to the closer city. So we started to experiment with women. So it took us about a year to experiment and come to a conclusion that it actually makes sense. Women, we believe, are the best suited for this work. They're very sincere, they're very focused. More importantly, the women in this village or any of the other villages that we're present in wouldn't otherwise get the opportunity, right? They would never actually come out of the village.
Chaturvedi started Harwa because he believes there is untapped potential in India's villages. The tasks here may be no more complex than data entry, and employees only make about 4,000 rupees a month. But Chaturvedi believes that it's a step towards creating value in India's villages. With Pooja Chaturvedi in Tikli, Anupam Verma, Men.
So I hope you saw the black and white monitors, right? That's the jugaad. Okay. The reason for this is I want to actually insist and tell people that money will never solve the problems. Money is only a helper, right? If money could solve the problems, Mr. Mukesh Ambani would have tapped rural India long back, right? The point here is you've got to control the asset value to be able to realize the profits. You can't put 1 crore and then say, well, my ROI is not coming and it's less than 0.1%. Well, it won't be, right? So you've got to start with 10 rupees, make another 10, then put more, okay? That's the whole idea of jugaad. Can we get the second video? So this is like when we started, and the video that you'll see now is like a year back. We haven't really been able to get any good quality videos after that, but happy to kind of share with you. So this is last year. See the difference in centers.
Welcome back. You're watching the Young Turks Dream Decade. We're starting a brand new segment. It's called Young Turks Gets Real. The idea really is to find entrepreneurs who have their eye on the opportunities that emerging India is throwing up. One such entrepreneur is Ajay Chaturvedi, a Wharton graduate. He came back to India and launched a BPO that focuses on harnessing the human capital in rural India. Harwa is his BPO. He's got operations spread over 4 states and 30 villages, and he's hoping to employ 5,000 women by 2014. Here's the story of Ajay Chaturvedi and Harwa.
Ajay Chaturvedi believes in the socio-capitalist business model to harness the value of rural India. A Wharton graduate, Ajay quit his job with Citibank to set up Harwa, a for-profit rural enterprise in 2010. What started as an idea to educate farmers on the latest farming techniques today also boasts of a first of its kind women-only run BPO in a small village called Tikli Aklimpur near Gurgaon. Within a year of operations, Harwa already has 200 women on its rolls and has also expanded its presence to Pilani and Jhunjhunu villages in Rajasthan. Trained in basic computer skills, these women are equipped to handle data entry, document scanning and even web research, and they earn anywhere between 4,000 to 10,000 rupees a month. But what made Ajay make his shift from an urban to a rural setting?
You're trying to do attrition control after the fact that, people have already got this aspiration in them. That is not the right way. What I looked at was, you're talking about unemployment is one of the big problems in the country, and you are talking of attrition as the other big problem. The art was to be able to marry these two things, given the disparities, given the differences that you have. And so that is why I chose to come to village and employ the women, because they are, and the kind of women that you've seen in these centers, they're all ghungar clad, they've never gone out, but they have this spark to work and they have the basic education. So for us, the key was to be able to prove what we can do for them to be able to work in these BPO centers. So for me, it makes sense because not only are they more dedicated, they're far better suited to do this work. They're very focused. For them, it's a community feel, right? They take lesser breaks and they're far more efficient.
While BPO continues to be a revenue generator for Harva, Ajay's next big bet is to initiate community farming practices. He's already launched the Harva pilot project to train farmers in new and efficient techniques of farming. For instance, in Rajgarh village near Pilani, Harva encourages farmer groups to grow aloe vera, lemongrass and chamomile that gives them better returns in the domestic as well as global markets. Spread in 30 villages across 4 states, Harva has turned 100 acres of barren land into revenue-yielding soil and changed the lives of 70 families.
Typically, the low-produce areas, when they farm the conventional crops, mustard or wheat or bajra or whichever other crop they're doing, in the low-produce areas where there's lack of rainfall, they don't make anything more than 1,000 to 1,500 rupees per month per acre. The kind of crops that we're able to grow for them or help them grow, for example, lemongrass, which is the lowest form, they're able to make at least 4,000 to 5,000 rupees per month per acre without water, right? Same thing with aloe vera, same thing with any other crop that we're looking at. Like I said, it's different strokes for different folks. We have to look at the specifics in any state.
Having already grossed revenues of 2 crore rupees, Harva has created a self-sustainable ecosystem in the villages it services. It set up student and medical help desks to support the rural youth and women. These help desks provide information on universities and even hold counseling sessions, whereas the medical help desks provide information on basic medical care. Ajay also hopes to launch a micro-lending initiative to further empower the agrarian economy.
In the next 2 to 3 years, we plan to employ at least 5,000 more women in the rural BPOs, and in the next 4 to 5 years, double that strength to about 10,000. So 100 centers, 20 states, 10,000 women on the ground, and affecting 1,000 women per 10,000 women, basically about few million people that you're looking at affecting in terms of just this growth. We've already affected thousands of lives. By virtue of these women getting employed, they further then infiltrate their own places. But you're looking at community farming, you're looking at alternative renewable sources of energy, you're looking at Harva employee loan programs, which then further will infiltrate. Most importantly, this will be able to get information to the students by student help desks and medical diagnostic services to the people who really are not able to access the cities.
Ajay here is wishing you and Harva the very best of luck. Time for us to take a break, but when we return, the grand finale of the Microsoft BizSpark Tech Challenge. $100,000 to be won, and we...
So that's it, guys. Questions? Yeah. No, I think you'll need to take the... Yeah.
So as you earlier mentioned in your speech,
yeah.
You gave the name example.
Right.
In what you did, create a business opportunity with a sustainable environment.
Yes.
So don't you think that is a very practical idea, but not that much implementation is there on a macro level? This is what you thought and implemented.
Yes.
This is not what everyone does. This is not what the government does.
Exactly.
So don't you think this should be encouraged more on a macro level?
Absolutely. They should be.
As in, so what is Harva doing about it?
Okay,
and so I have a second question.
Okay.
Recently I read an interview about you in which you said that we should not finance those who don't have a huge income because there is no point financing that.
Exactly.
So how do you justify that in per capita income of India and the availability of high finance?
I'm sorry, I kind of missed the question. You're talking about the business financing or you're talking about microfinancing?
No, in the interview, there was a question, I don't know the question, the answer was, there is no need to finance those who have less income.
Right.
Because that finance is not sufficient.
Right.
Because they don't have a sustainable income.
Exactly, yeah.
So how do you justify that? Because in India, there is a high availability of finance, but the per capita income, if we see of India, is very low.
Right.
And the farmers which are very poor obviously
Right.
need a high amount of finance.
Okay. So I'm always talking about, do you have a similar question or a different question? Okay. So can I just answer this one? So I've always had something very, very different, right? I don't, I've done this workshop like at several colleges. I think it was Miranda House and Young India Fellowship Program where, I basically talk about, guys, don't try to think different. Just think the way you are, because you're already different, okay? There's nothing like men and women equality. Men are different, women are different. Let's celebrate our differences, okay? With that as basis, if you start thinking about it, everything actually makes sense, okay? What the government is doing today, for example, and I'm not pro or anti-government, I'm just saying, a lot of illogical things that I'm seeing around. People are distributing cell phones. It will cost us 7,000 crores despite the fiscal deficit. You're looking at distributing a cell phone when people don't have electricity, when people don't have water, people don't have bank accounts, or people don't have financial inclusion. So the government is saying, let's do financial inclusion. How do you do that? By opening a bank account. That's as lame as saying, let me give you right to food by giving you an empty plate. Well, now that you have a bank account and an empty plate, you need a phone to manage it and order pizzas. Let me just give you a phone. It's as illogical as that. What I really need to do is flip it, okay? So let me give you a very, very different example. Time magazine does a study. They say, who do you think is the largest producer of milk in the world? Guess is India. Who do you think wastes the largest amount of milk in the world? It's India. So if India is the largest producer of milk, ideally I should be able to take this Time magazine study and go to my, guy who I'm getting the milk from. Incidentally, we moved from like buying milk from mother dairy to, buying it from the villages because, it just makes sense. So if I were to go to this farmer and say, look, dude, you've got, 5 cattle and, Time magazine study says you need to be producing more milk, so you should produce more milk. I mean, go deeper, right? You're very analytical guys. You start asking the question, so why is it not, right? It's got low, calorific value. So fine, it does have low calorific value, but if you've got abundance in this, why don't you start producing something? Because who cares, right? I mean, today, if my calorific value of petrol is high, but so is the price, right? So let me not burn that. Let me burn something which is freely available in abundance and with low calorific value. The problem that I realized is that there is no ownership. That is why the gobar gas plants did not succeed. So what we did in this, in just one of the innovations, is we actually convinced 200 farmers of the 200 women's households to get gobar for free in the center's gobar gas plant. And we actually converted that to electricity, which is by, with the help of a company in the US. And once that converts to electricity, the manure that's left over is far more high quality to be substituted in the farms. And the gas that is produced produces enough electricity to be consumed in the center, which is 10 kilowatts kVA per day to run 200 computers. It's sustainability. So to answer your question in a brief is, if you start to look at a sustainable solution of whatever you're doing, if you start justifying by solving a problem and giving them finance, it's not going to help. You got to start giving him a sustainable way to make money and then give him the finance. So now if I talk about this guy's got so many cattle and let me give him finance of 15 lakhs to actually build a plant, it makes sense. If I'm giving him a finance to fund a chiller plant to preserve the milk because we're wasting so much of milk, it makes sense. But if I'm just giving him money to buy food or pizza, it's unsustainable.
Good afternoon, sir. Sir, I want to ask you that how much weightage do you give to your education from Wharton Business School for the success which you have achieved?
Huge, man, huge. It's huge.
So, is it that if one enters such good business schools, it's almost sure shot that one would turn into a very good entrepreneur when he
Not
comes
necessarily. I mean, I could have been a happier investment banker as well. It's just that, where exactly do you start to realize yourself? So, I read this really interesting quote from somebody recently. Is that, we all talk about the college dropouts and, 90% of the entrepreneurs are college dropouts. You first got to look at, which colleges did they drop out of, right? So, Bill Gates, he was already in Cambridge and, I think Harvard, and Mark Zuckerberg was in Harvard and, whichever other colleges. So, I think it makes sense, what you're saying. It definitely helped me, right? I'd work towards it, slog towards it. But the point is, what I'm going to do is something I decide with myself. That is independent of the college. How you execute what you wanted to do is something that you get in the college. So first at least your journey is beginning here. At least decide what you want to do. Do you want to sell water? Do you want to package beer? Do you want to, cultivate, flowers? Whatever it is that you want to do. There's a hand there.
Yeah, there's another question.
Sir, what I feel is that in India growth has been there, but development has not been taking place on that basis, the socio-economic basis.
Right.
For example, let us take the case of Haryana. In Haryana, some of the cities like maybe Panchkula or Gurgaon or Faridabad are doing much more well, much better than Jeend or maybe Bahadurgarh or Ambala. So, what's your take on that? Is it primarily related to the distribution of resources you mentioned, or any other major factor which you can take?
It is. In fact, I'd love to engage with you guys. I'm happy that you come up with it. I've engaged with other Delhi University colleges on this. Guys, this is purely a case of incentives, purely, okay? I'm sure nobody will agree to it. I'm sure, you talk to the first government official, they don't agree to it. But think about it. You actually want to set up something. So you talk about, let's say, I were to give you, $100 and say, yeah, your mother gives you $100 and he says, go out and get me vegetables. So you go out there and you start to bargain with the, the guy, the theli wala that comes next. You say, kheere kitne bhao hai, and the guy says 20 rupees. You haggle and you finally save about $5 and you're really happy and you go and tell your mom, this is how much I got and this is how much I paid. But then the very next minute you actually go out to a 5-star hotel and you buy a beer for $500, which is 10 times the price. It's called predictably irrational behavior. And that's exactly what's happening when we're doing the tendering process. The government might say, we've spent like 500 crores on building this highway. NH8 is a prime example. But then you'll go for the lowest bidder with absolutely no other, fixes and balances in place. Unless you do that, you cannot control the quality. And that's exactly what we need to do. Right? So we need to change it at the very, very fundamental grassroots level where you say, it's great you get the lowest price, but you also need to maintain this and...
I have two questions for you. The first one is that presently you have 500 women employees.
Yes.
And you hope to get 5,000 women employees by 2014.
Yes.
So could you just share some of your strategies that how would you increase the employment level by like 10 times in 2 years?
Right.
And second question would be, what is your source of inspiration to innovate? Is it because you travel and meet people, so you get their point of views and different perceptions? Is that the source of inspiration to innovate?
Sure. So the source of inspiration is really, that's something that I'm passionate about. I really like to, sort of innovate and do things, look at things differently just because that's the way I am. That's the way I'm wired. Right? So I wouldn't really fall into the same rat trap, I wouldn't be one of the guys who'd be criticizing fairness schemes for, because people are doing this. And look at India, we are promoting fairness schemes. I don't think that's even the right way to look at it. So for me, it's innovation. It's, the problem begins with me. Let me start solving the problem with me as well. That's number one. Number two, the reason I showed you these two videos is the first video you saw the complete jugaad, right? The reason why Tata Nano failed is not because it's the cheapest car. It failed because it's the cheapest car, right? Think about it. You have an aspirational good. It's like, you're gifting your girlfriend a diamond ring and you tell her, honey, it's the cheapest diamond ring that I've got. You just lost the plot there. So Tata Nano was basically launched with the wrong, tagline. Today it's selling really well. It's selling incidentally in the US for about $14,000 and I think in Sri Lanka for about $12,000. So it's definitely way over its price. Now the point is, you're competing a Tata Nano with Jugaad, which is 4 times the seating capacity, 1/3 the price, and is fully air ventilated, right? And can be repaired at any mechanic shop. Now you're talking about Tata Nano. It's air conditioned, 4 seating capacity, and can't be repaired anywhere else other than the Tata showroom. That's where you're missing the point. So what we started out, the first center was with Jugaad, right? That was grassroots, it was basic, bare bones. Not that I couldn't have got finance. We got excessive investor interest today, but I've still not got investors in. That's what we started out. We made it profitable, got it to an organic level. Acquired 2 companies, one from the Goenkas, and it actually makes sense. So today I've got it to 500 level. Now the expansion strategy is completely different. Now it's like a corporate, right? Now you basically replicate it. You make corporate partnerships. Government of Bhutan has invited us, government of Pakistan has invited us. I'm very happy to go there. There are some Naxal areas in Chhattisgarh who invited us. I'm perfectly fine because I understand. Why did Ajmal Kasab, do this, what he did in 7/11? Not because of, him being a fundamentalist. Fundamentalism, I think, exists only at the topmost level. At the grassroots level, he did it for 1.5 lakh rupees. So if you could satisfy that, you basically address the problem of the grassroots. Yeah, this one.
Hi. So I'm very much interested in social entrepreneurship.
Right.
But I'm sure I'm asking this question I mean, a number of other people want to ask.
Right.
If I have an idea,
Right.
where do I go? I belong to the maybe the medium middle class.
Right.
I don't know where to go. I mean, you worked in the corporate sector. Maybe you had some money with you. I mean, I know there are foundations like the Ashoka Foundation and the others who
Sure.
are supporting this. But if I have an idea, for example, like I want to start something on the lines of B Corp in the US. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah, I have.
The standardization for CSR.
I have, yeah.
But I don't know where to go. I have no idea who to approach first. So what do you think should be done in India?
Okay. So back to the first point. First of all, discard this term social entrepreneurship or social enterprises. I consciously don't call myself a social entrepreneur. I don't think that's the right definition. Because in my mind, every enterprise is a social enterprise. Tata's is like the biggest social enterprise because they're really doing something for the society. In fact, every enterprise is a social enterprise or it's anti-social. Taliban is a social enterprise, right? They're serving some society at large and they're definitely serving their interests. So the point is, you start with what is it that you're passionate about and how is it going to make a difference in what you really care about. Once you start with that perspective, discard the definition. Don't start looking at, I've started to call it a socio-capitalistic model because people ask me, so what is it? I don't want to call it a social enterprise. So I said, look, I'm a banker, I'm doing this, and eventually it's about value creation. My passion is value creation. My passion is innovation, value creation, and eventually it has to make financial sense. If it's not stable, I'm not going out for grants. I'm not going out for, all these, sort of funding agencies. I'm saying, look guys, I'm creating true value. If you're interested, great, look at it. The point is, you start first with yourself. Identify exactly what you want to do. Unless you have a clear idea of what you want to do, you can't define it. Unless you can define it, people will not understand it. So first you understand what you want to do. And don't model it on something else. Trust me, everyone knows what Microsoft does. Microsoft business model is pretty much an open book. But have you seen a Microsoft number 2? Have you seen a Google number 2? Have you seen a Facebook number 2? There are far better programs in India today who can make far better, Facebook platforms than Facebook itself. But do you see a Facebook 2? No. It's the right place, right time, right orientation, and it kicks off. So Facebook kicked off because it was launched in Harvard. It's got the aspirational value, and it works. So you've got to figure out what are those things that you're looking at your level. If you can understand, okay, these are my plus points. Stop focusing on what you don't have. I've not gone to Ivy League business school. I'm not from a super rich family. I'm not this. I'm not that. Forget that. What do you have right now? That's why your story begins right here, right now, with you. You're the most important person, and whatever you have is the most important thing. Couldn't get better. Now, where do you start?
Thank
Something
you.
here.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Unfortunately, that's the all the time we have got today. Much.
That's it. Thanks very much.